So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nation custodians on the lands that we are meeting on and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining you today from the Turrbal and Yagara land here in Brisbane. There's a great deal of content for us to get through today in a very condensed period of time. So can you please all ensure that you are on mute? If you do have any questions, can you please use the Slido details that were circulated prior to the event that are available on screen now? They will be available in the chat.
Sorry.
And
sorry, I have to turn this off.
Yeah, so the Slido details are available in the chat. If you see a question that you want answered, be sure to like it so it increases its priority. Just a reminder, just to mute yourselves. Thank you. Today's session will be recorded so that the content that is presented can be shared as video at a later date. It is a condensed session. However, you've all been provided with the complete slide deck from our in-person event that happened a couple of weeks ago. This is for your reference. Each speaker today will focus on the key points from their presentations. Next slide, please. Just to let you know that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, formally announced the 2025 federal election, which will take place in Australia on Saturday, the 3rd of May. With this announcement and the dissolution of the House of Representatives by the Governor-General on Friday, the 28th of March, the government has now assumed a caretaker role and the caretaker conventions are now in place. Your involvement in our engagement relates to the implementation of existing legislation and does not indicate any future policy of government. This means we'll just continue as business as usual to make sure we're implementing what we need to do. Now I'll hand across to Karen Najjar, the NVES Regulator Branch Assistant Secretary, to provide us with an update. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Dave, and welcome everyone. It's fantastic to see such a large number of people joining us today. And we had a really good turnout to our in-person event in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, but of course it's very difficult for many of you to join us in person, and so we're really pleased to say hello to you online. As Dave mentioned, it is quite a condensed session to get through a lot of content, so we're going to try and keep to just the high points. So I might just go to the next slide, please. So some of you will have met me before. My name is Karen Najjar. I am the NVES Assistant Secretary, NVES Regulator. And I thought we might just start by going back in time a little bit to say, well, why are we talking to you and why have we really focused our attentions both in our in-person event and also today and actually for the next several months on our regulated entities? And the reason for this is really comes back to the decisions that were made by the government when they were actually passing the NVES legislation. So what they decided was that to begin this NVES process, the place to start was to talk to the people who are already involved in regulating vehicles coming into Australia. And so to become an NVES regulated entity, you are someone who holds a VTA and who imports one of the covered vehicle types under NVES. And so that's why we're talking to you. We're really focusing on moving beyond the policy conversation and coming down to the practicalities of what does this look like for you as you're starting to change your business practices and as you're starting to try and make decisions within your own companies and organisations about how you'll actually go about complying. One of the things that we've been hearing over and over again, and it's really pleasing to hear as a regulator, is how you all want to comply. And what you're looking for from us is to actually understand what that means and what you need to do. I very much see my job as the NVES regulator is to ensure that you have the information, the tools and the guidance that you need to do your part. And that ensures also that my team has the same so that we can do our part of that as well. It is a partnership. And none of us succeed if one of us fails. So I see that we're in this together to really make a success of the NVES. Next slide, please, Vinny. So many of you would have seen this slide before, and one of the things I just wanted to talk about very quickly before I talk about some of the detail on this slide is that as a government regulator here in Australia, there's actually a range of responsibilities, requirements and guidance that I'm expected to follow in how I and my team goes about our job. One of the really important ones is something called RMG 128. And basically it's the government's direction to me as a regulator that says, how do I expect you to behave and act? And the three really key elements of RMG 128 that we use and that drive our regulatory approach are about collaboration and engagement. That means understanding you and your business and working together with you to make sure you know what you need to do and that we know what we're doing. That we're risk-based and data-driven. I think that sort of speaks for itself. And also that we work for continuous improvement and to build trust with you as our regulated entities and with the government and other stakeholders. So the NVES regulator approach that you see on screen should be quite familiar. Every regulator really has something of this nature, and if those of you who've been engaged with our RVS or road safety colleagues for some time, you'll see that I've actually borrowed this from our road safety colleagues. And that's fundamentally because we are very closely aligned to and working with our RVS colleagues to make sure that you as the regulated entity has as smooth a pathway forward as possible. But it's also recognising that we're at different points in our engagement and process as regulators. So we expect, and we're operating as the NVES regulator, having heard that many of you have said to us quite directly, we want to comply. You just need to help me understand how. Some of you will get to a point where you're trying to comply, but maybe are struggling with some of the different pieces. And so most of our attention, time and effort in the next several months, and indeed in the first compliance year, we very much focus towards working with you in that voluntary and assisted space to make sure that you get the tools and guidance and information you need to be able to be successful in working in the NVES. Now, we hope we don't get to the upper end of the compliance pyramid, but of course, in the event that we find that people are not complying or choosing not to change their behaviours when we've advised that something's not quite right, then we do have the tools and powers available to us to be able to use some of those more directed and enforcement powers available. Having said that, the principles behind our approach really are about engaging and educating with you on how to achieve that voluntary compliance by communicating very factually and by building systems that increase transparently report and communicate outcomes to you. We don't want you to be surprised by what happens when we get to the point of issuing an IEV. We want to have set up a situation where we've been communicating clearly with you what to expect and that we can have had any conversations we need to have along the way if something's not as either side was anticipating. So you'll have the chance to also assess and monitor the information that you've submitted and say if there's something that's come up that's not quite right, be able to correct that. And if we're doing that within a compliance year, that's a very much a voluntary and assisted process where we're working together to get the best accuracy and integrity into our system as we can. Next slide, please, Vinny. So I'm just going to close because I'm the least important and exciting person you'll hear from today. There's a lot of detailed content to get to, but just highlighting for you some of the priorities that we've had up to now in 2025 and that we will be focusing on for the rest of 2025. So obviously, quite happily, the NVES Act was passed some time ago. It came into effect on the 1st of January this year, and we have indeed established the NVES Regulator. So I have a branch, we're here within the department. We are supported and work closely with others in our department, but we're operating as the NVES Regulator right now. We've obviously identified and we're now engaging, continuing to engage with many of you as regulated entities, but also recognising that our regulated entities don't come as one size fits all. So we're really starting to understand more about you and how you operate. We've been working, as I said, very closely with the other vehicles and emissions regulators across the Commonwealth, and we're in the processes now of establishing our unit registry and trading systems that will become more important as we get past the point of 2026 when we have IEVs issued and the first units appearing in the markets. And of course, something many of you have asked about since before I started was some more detail about how we're going to go about our compliance activities and how we're going to support you as regulated entities. So there's more detail on that coming soon. I will say we've had some really great conversations I really value and thank you for the inputs that you provided through both public means, through our working groups, through questions and letters. And we will continue to work to understand what's driving you and your concerns and answer where we can any of those questions that help to bring clarity to what you need to do. So I think with no further ado, I will then pass the next back to Dave, who'll take you through some of the detail of how we've been forming some of those regulation and performance pieces. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Karen. And just a reminder, Slido link is in the side there with the passcode for anyone who's trying to get into those. Next slide, please, Vinny. Thank you. So I'm going to cut straight to the chase. So you'll recall in the previous webinar that I discussed our core activities as a regulator, and you will have noticed that that was included in the full slide pack along with the compliance approach just for your information so that you can, I guess, absorb rules that away from, I guess, a 1 hour session. We've deliberately chosen to focus our attention, as Karen just described, on focusing our attention on supporting you to achieve the outcomes, your obligations of the Act. And so one of the things that we have chosen, as I had spoken about in the previous webinar as well, is our account management approach. So really what I wanted to quickly just run through is what the role of an account manager will be. It is focused on, I guess, more primarily the engage and educate stage within our compliance approach, and also the assess and monitor stage. The respond is where we support you where there's compliance activities that need to be undertaken to help, I guess, get you back on track in regards to your obligations under the Act. The majority of our attention will be focused on, I guess, assigning you with an account manager, which is the process that we're still working through at the moment to work out how we can balance and have the right people assigned to entities, but to ensure that you're getting your queries answered to, that tailored support as we understand how your entity operates, providing you education around your obligations and how to use our systems as they become available, keeping you informed of key dates and any changes that may be on the horizon in regards to key dates and policy changes that might be on the horizon. In our assess and monitor stage, and maybe, Vinny, if we can go to the next slide, please, because it probably goes into a little bit more detail, is our role as account managers across the life cycle. So we have sort of 4 main stages, which is prepare, comply, trade, and manage, which is what we're saying are the life cycles within for you as a regulated entity. We'll publish that guidance that you need to see, and we'll work with you to ensure that you understand. Particularly in the prepare stage, we'll be looking at how we help you to establish your accounts and your authorizations that you'll need to access the various systems, whether it's our dashboards, whether it's the unit registry further down the track, whether it's assisting you through, account applications for the unit registry to make sure that we've got integrity and that we're mitigating any risks in those processes. But using our account management approach to actually engage and educate and make sure that we're taking you through those processes in an in-depth activity. Whilst we'll be doing that to help you prepare for any of your obligations into the future, our main focus is really going to be around the compliance activities, ensuring that whilst we are building validations into the system to ensure that the data that you're submitting to us is curated in a way that we expect, we'll be spending a lot of time focusing on trying to detect anomalies in the data set, and then we will be reaching out and working with you to I guess, seek guidance from yourselves around the accuracy or any of those anomalies, what's actually going on with them. So that is where the account managers will be spending a lot of their time, is really in the verification of the information that's being provided, and also some evaluation activities of how your systems operate, getting an understanding of what processes you have around data assurance within your entities, how that relates to the transmission of information to us, and really building through some audit activities down the track that will help build integrity within the data system that we will be building which will help then better inform our validation processes down the track. So that's in our life cycle, really focusing a lot on the comply, helping you to make sure you're complying with the obligations. And then the next part will be making sure that we've got oversight when we get further down the track and we actually see people trading units within the unit registry. So from February 2026 and beyond, is just making sure that the unit trading activity occurs in accordance with the registry rules that we're currently developing, and the registry guide that you'll receive down the track is just making sure that we're safeguarding the integrity of the registry and ensuring that those unit trades occur as we expect and the transmission occurs as we would expect in alignment with the legislation. We'd like to spend less time in the formal request to managing compliance, which is quite the pointy end of the compliance pyramid, but obviously we will have all of our regulatory tools available to us should we need to move into that space. Next slide, please, Vinny. I'm sorry, that's a lot of information to take in just around, I guess, what our commitment will be under an account management approach. We will be developing that out as a full product that we'll be able to give you so that you can take away and we can have discussions individually with you as you are assigned an account manager of what it means to you. We just wanted to give you a timeline of life as a regulated entity. So this kind of just describes, I guess, where we are now and where we are headed to. So obviously we're headed towards the 1st of July where the mandatory performance period actually begins, and you will then be required to submit your information to the RAV, as Anthony will talk to. And then on the 31st of December, the 2025 performance period ends. And then on the 1st of January 2026, obviously the new performance period for the following calendar year begins. And then we'll be looking to issue your first IEV sometime in February of 2026 and continue to update and publish information around unit holdings and those things as they happen again and again. And that'll head us down the track to sort of down in the future to February 2028, where we'll see the first final emissions values being determined. And at that point in time, the regulator will have the ability to issue infringement notices if required to the entities. And I'll probably I'm just going to check. Vinny, do we have one more slide on infringements? Excellent. So yeah, so once we get to that position, we go through that life cycle where we've had the IEV, you've had your time to consider paying your penalty in relation, you've got your options that you have. You'll either have a position to be able to pay your penalty notice that will be issued. The penalty that will be issued for you will be equivalent to the units that you haven't actually met the target to, times by $50. The $50 refers to a small component of the Regulatory Powers Act, where we're able to issue an infringement notice for 50% less than the actual penalty that could be enforced by a court of law. So in the terms of the legislation, Section 17 says $100. We can only issue an infringement notice to 50% of that. So when we get to that point in time, 28 days after, then if you haven't been in the position where you've traded out your units, then we'll issue with it an infringement notice and you'll have 28 days to pay that notice. There is an infringement notice, a guidance note that we're actually preparing in conjunction with our legal team. We're anticipating that we would be able to release it very soon, just because of the caretaker provisions that are now in place. There's some extra due diligence that we need to ensure that we meet before we're able to circulate that draft guidance to you all. So with that, I know that was a lot of information there about account management and just a very brief overview on the infringement notices, but I might just finish there and we'll go to the questions that have been posed in the Slido.
Thanks, Dave. Our first question comes from an anonymous user, and the question is for you. If an agreement to buy and sell credits is made between OEMs outside of the system, what is the detailed process for reflecting that agreement in the transferring of credits in the NVES portal? I assume that evidence is required.
So I think there's two parts to that question. So the first one is, as we're building the unit registry, there will be a process that you will go through to be able to advise us of the exchange of units only. So we would be interested in, I'm exchanging, Dave's exchanging, units across to Karen because she has entered into a contract outside. And so all as the regulator would be wanting to see is the notice that as instructing us to move those units on the registry between those two accounts. There'll be a process that confirms that with the two parties. There's no evidence required of what contractual arrangements that you've put in place.
Great, thank you, Dave. Next question is the dashboard created for each VTA number, vehicle type approval number, or is it created for each brand? And I think this is a business systems design question. So Anthony.
Look, I'll cover that in my business systems talk.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question is, how is the initial responsible user determined to undertake the fit and proper person test? Dave, this is probably for you.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so as part of, I guess, us getting to better understand how your entities operate, what we will be doing is working through with you to go when the timing is right to help with that prepare component that on that slide that we had before, you will have seen in the middle that there was the FPP, is to understand your entity and to ensure that we work with you to make sure we identify the correct users for each of the systems, and we'll work through that to ensure that you're supported in meeting the requirements of account creation and appropriate access.
Wonderful.
We won't just release a guide. We'll make sure we work with you so that you understand the requirements. Thank you. I'll stop there and I might hand over to Anthony.
Thanks, Dave. And hello, everybody. We might go to the first slide. Thanks, Genevieve. Okay, so I'll talk to this slide. Basically, my talk will be all summarised in this slide, but if you need further detail, please refer to the full pack, which was emailed to you before this seminar. So look, what I'm going to do is take you through the IT build so far and highlight the milestones that will be important to regulated entities. First, what we can all agree is that it's in everyone's interest that the NVES systems function effectively and efficiently. And I want to thank everyone in the industry who has engaged in the process to date. We've implemented a phased approach to ensure that the IT is fit for purpose and delivers the functions when they are needed. Our completed foundational work has included setting up a technical IT working group and develop an overall service design blueprint, which our consultants, Deloitte, will present shortly. Building on these foundations, we have commenced all three phases of work. Phase 1 covers data capture, building in the new NVES fields for NVES and building in the new RAV fields for NVES and operating a testing environment, and that's well underway. Phase 2 covers the assessment of that data and the use of the results. As part of this phase, we expect to release a desktop NVES calculator to help entities with fleet planning. And phase 3 is developing the unit registry, which will require everyone to open an account first in order to receive or trade in NVES units. Before I pass on to our consultants to take us through the service design blueprint, can I draw your attention to the arrangements for the pre-July go-live? So we intend the RAV changes for NVES to go live in late May or early June, once we have confirmed the technical factors. If you upload your NVES data to the RAV before 1 July, it is voluntary, but if you choose to do so, the data must be correct when checked against the RAV's acceptance criteria. Uploading NVES data before 1 July will allow you to check your systems for NVES data are connecting with the department systems and test large volume uploads against the RAV acceptance criteria. The NVES data entered before 1 July will not be counted towards the 2025 fleet performance. That data, however, will be publicly visible on the RAV, but will be deleted as soon as we are able from 1 July. Ahead of the early go live, we have established a testing environment for checking the acceptance of NVES data in submissions of up to 20 vehicles. The testing environment, separate to the RAV, has helped participating entities and the regulator a lot, and the lessons learned will be built into the RAV from the pre-July go live date. If your company has not yet taken advantage of the testing environment, I strongly recommend you do so. Details about how to access the testing environment are on the regulator's website. Now, I recognise there are a few questions that have built up, and I do want to also give Daniel the opportunity to speak. So what we might do is we'll go straight over to Daniel from Deloitte now, and then we'll circle back to me to cover off all the IT-related questions, including that one we had before about VTA holders. So look, over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Anthony. And there's a chat, so we might answer some of them as we go through this. We'll jump to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk you through at pace what is a service blueprint and then walk you through the service blueprint we've been developing. I appreciate that not everyone will be able to consume all of the information in this very short time. So do encourage you to ask questions in the session or send through any questions or queries via email to the team afterwards as well, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Before I jump into it though, what is a service blueprint? So what we're aiming to do with this is to illustrate the end-to-end experience that we're aiming to deliver in the future state. So it will show how the people, the processes, and the technology interact throughout the whole journey to deliver the experience that will be participating in the NVES regulation. So it'll have a couple of different components as we move down the page. There'll be a narrative that tells the story of what's the objectives, the goals, and the sequence for the users. A high-level process flow in the middle, which we've broken down into front stage, which is where you, our regulated entities, will participate, and backstage, where the regulator will participate. And obviously, they'll be passing back and forth as we move through the process. And then along the base, we've also got some supporting swim lanes that show some of the behind-the-scenes information, such as the technology, the data, the legislative considerations that have informed how we've built out the experience. Enough about that. Let's jump straight into it if we can, please, Vinny. Thank you. Awesome. If we can zoom in a bit there, Vinny. But I'll start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief overview and focus on some of the key phases. But I know there's some questions that have already started coming through about what you might have pre-read. And then, oh, I don't know if it's just me, Vinny, but it looks like it's disappeared.
Apologies, give me 1 second.
All good. I might just, in the interest of time, start talking to the first phase, which we won't dwell on too much, which is really about understanding your obligations. So we want to make sure it's really clear to you as a regulated entity that there's a number of self-service options you can use to gather information. So that'll be things like what's published on the website. There'll also be regular updates and engagement opportunities such as this, and then the workshop a few weeks ago, and those will continue. And you'll be able to subscribe to newsletters as well as hear about what's being published on the portal and formal notices. And I know Dave's touched on briefly the account manager. Once your account managers are set up and introduced, you'll also have access to your account managers as a person you can reach out to for any questions or concerns. Jumping then into the next phase, which I'll go through really quickly, that's all about what you as the regulated entity will do in collecting and measuring the data of your emissions for your fleet. We know you'll have processes and you'll need to transform the data to make sure it meets the requirements, but you can always reach out there if you've got questions or concerns. Then scooting across into the next phase, register. So this is where the you as a regulated entity will be able to set up your access to the portal. The intent is to deliver a relatively seamless experience by reusing the Rover portal and building on it to introduce some new modules, but mean that you don't need to set up new authentication and access for anyone who has a Rover account, but there will be a new permission type related to NVES. So similar to how there's separate permissions for compliance or recalls or anything to do with your applications and approvals, we'll be able to segment that so that you can make sure just the key users have access to what they need. So in here, a responsible user can set up a application to gain access to a registry account. So that will also be an additional step that the regulated entity will undertake beyond just having access to the NVES data within the Rover portal. And so you can control who within your organization needs to have access to the registry account for the purposes of viewing or enacting transactions. The person who commences that will be a responsible user. And I know, Dave, you answered the question on that before, but they need to be able to act on behalf of the VTA holder who's requesting the account. And they'll need to complete an FPP test, which declares that the organization or individual holding the account is fit and proper and meets all the requirements to hold an account, and that they, as a representative, also meet the requirements. Those applications will be assessed by the regulator, and there's an opportunity for the regulator to seek additional information if required. What we've then got is that in most situations, hopefully, the information provided will meet the requirements of the regulator. You'll receive a notification that your account has been opened, and the responsible will then be able to configure access levels for other users to also gain access to the registry. And they'll also need to then declare that they're fit and proper and meet the requirements. In certain scenarios, however, there might be a case where an application for a registry account is refused. An example of this might be the organization already has a registry account, and so you don't get another one. In that case, you'd be informed of the department's decision and the reasoning for that decision as well. All right, jumping across to the next one, please, Vinny. So the next phase is then stepping into submit and declare. So this is not very different to anyone who's already got access to Rover and adding vehicles to the RAV. I won't harp on about it too much because I'm sure everyone's already heard a lot about the new fields being added to the RAV. And essentially what we're illustrating here is the existing RAV process will continue. However, it has some new fields capturing NVES specific data. That'll be ingested into Rover when you submit a RAV submission. And if there's any issues, you'll be notified of that in the same process as you currently are, that those particular entries within your batch weren't able to be accepted because of these issues, and you'll be able to address those and resubmit. Or where it goes swimmingly, you'll just get a confirmation of submission and you'll pay your RAV levy as you currently do in Rover. All right. Then moving across into our track and reconcile. So this is where in the future state, you'll be able to view a dashboard of your NVES details inside Rover that has some information related to the entries you've put into the RAV, your current view of what the emissions value is for the year, any notices of infringement or letters from the department. For example, the exact contents of that dashboard is still to be defined and something we're hoping to refine and test our ideas with you as we continue the detailed design process. There's an intent that you might be able to customize that dashboard view to only look at, say, data for a particular month, and that you might need to export that data if you wanted to then feed it back into your own system to reconcile or run some reports against what you've reported through the RAV and what the system is showing. Okay, jumping into our make corrections phase that I know a lot of people are interested in. This should again look familiar for anyone who's familiar with the RAV correction process through Rover. We aren't looking to change the RAV correction process, and as Karen alluded to, particularly when there's errors that you've noticed within a short amount of time, this is just letting you make those corrections so that we can enable you to comply. So if you need to make an amendment to the RAV entry, you'll use the RAV correction form in Rover. That'll have the ability to now also correct the NVES fields. They may request more information, and hopefully everything will go swimmingly again. They'll approve your correction request. The system will be updated. This is then where it gets a little bit different for the NVES experience, is if this is still during the reporting year, then there's no extra steps for you. That correction will flow straight through to your eventual interim emissions value calculation. But if it is after you've already been issued an IEV for the reporting year in which this RAV entry was made, then there's some extra steps later on in the process to have to potentially have your units adjusted if you've been over or under issued. Noting that obviously not all RAV corrections will necessarily impact your units. You know, if you're just correcting a typo or something, that won't flow straight through. Okay, into the next one, receiving your IEV. So on the interim reconciliation date, the system will calculate your IEV and the regulator will verify that, and you'll receive a notification that your IEV is now available in the portal, and it will also be published on the NVES Regulator's website as required by the Act. Once you've been made aware of that, you can review it in the portal, and if you have a registry account, because it's not mandatory, and if your IEV is less than 0, then you'll be issued your units. If you don't have a registry account open yet, you'll have 12 months from the first interim reconciliation day to open that account in order to gain units. Again, if you don't have any units yet, that's fine. And the system will issue you those units and they'll go straight into your registry account. Any users from your organization who have access to the unit registry will then be able to view the unit registry and see those units. This is the process I briefly touched on before about the RAV corrections and needing to update your units. So if after your IEV has been issued and then you've made a RAV correction that you believe means you're entitled to additional units, you'll have to then make an application through the portal for some non-standard units. So you'll then need to complete an application form that tells us how many additional units you believe based on the correction you're entitled to, based on the correction you've made, and submit that for the regulator to review. The regulator will then make a decision based on the evidence provided to either issue you the additional unit you've requested, additional units of a different amount than you've requested, if they, for example, believe there's a discrepancy in the calculations, or if they might decline that application if they don't believe you're entitled to additional units. If you were over-issued units, we hope that you might come forward and let us know that you believe you've been issued those units by mistake, and you can work with the account manager to address that. So there might be some options such as relinquishing or cancelling the units or offsetting against a future year, for example. I know that's a breakneck speed, but I'm going to then keep moving on so we can get through as much as possible in the time. Once you've been issued extra units, you better see those in your registry, and you'll always receive an update based on the decision. Into the next section, managing the units. So this is now where you can undertake transactions with your units in the registry. So someone who has the appropriate level of access in the registry can access the registry and review what units you have, the expiration date of those units, your transaction history, and any pending transactions. They might be able to alert others that they're open for a trade. So this is something we're still working through exactly how we do that, whether that's in the registry, whether that's in a different part of the NVES portal experience, or whether that's not something we do at all. The who has units available will be published as part of our requirements to publish it, but we don't have to publish who's interested in trades. So that's something we're seeking feedback on from industry. Off system, the buyer and seller will negotiate any trade arrangement, and the user will then, in the registry, initiate a transaction. And there's a couple of transaction types here. So they can trade or transfer units from one registry account to another. You can also extinguish units, which is where you use those units to offset your upcoming, your IEV amount that will become an FEV amount for a reporting year, so that you don't have any penalties at the end of the year. Or you can also retire units, which is essentially just like disposing of them if you're not interested in holding them or transferring them. When you make a request for a transaction, the regulator will review that and they can approve or refuse it. If there's any issues that means it needs to be refused, you'll hear about that from the regulator and why that was refused. And otherwise, the transaction will be enacted and you'll be able to see that that's happened in the registry. What we're also planning to do is send reminders and notifications to say you've got upcoming expiry dates, or that you might want to start extinguishing units prior to an FEV being calculated, so that you will avoid any penalties for that reporting year, because that they don't automatically offset against your IEV. Okay. Then how we get to our FEVs, because I think I've only got about a minute or so left. On the final reconciliation day, the system will calculate your FEV based on your IEV and the unit transactions you've undertaken since then. You'll receive notice of what your FEV is. If it is greater than 0, you'll then the account manager will prepare a brief for infringement notices, as Dave talked about before, and those have a 28-day payment cycle. If your FEV is 0 or less, no actions for you. Great job in meeting the requirements. And then if you need to pursue some alternate actions or payments, then you'll be able to investigate those. And then really quickly, the account managers will be able to review everything that's happening in NVES and the transactions and RAV corrections and all of those things to help identify where extra support and education might be required. If they need any details to help investigate an issue, they can contact you on system or off system and make sure they keep records of everything that's happened, so that if it's passing off between different departmental officers, say someone's on leave, everyone knows what's been happening. And in more concerning cases, there'll also be an opportunity for case managers to investigate issues similar to how we do that in the RVS world. They'll engage with you, and if there's any enforcement actions that need to be taken, they'll follow through all the appropriate channels, and there'll be an access for some reporting on the website, and external users may need to request or may choose to request data from NVES. Oh,
and time.
Breakneck
Thank
speed.
you, Daniel. And look, just to provide everyone some context, the service design material that Daniel's just gone through, that you also have in the pack we sent you for this webinar, it's our target state. So it won't all be delivered on 1 July, but it'll be something we'll progressively roll out. Where we're at the moment is we're now working through stepping that blueprint down into further detail and into developing the IT and non-IT solutions. So now's a good time. If you read through that and you see something for your company in terms of like a question, or you have an idea or a suggestion of how this can work from the industry side, now's the time to let us know. In the IT working group, which I chair, we have some workshops running to tease out these kinds of issues, and we have some further ones coming up. So yes, we want to work to make this the interaction of the IT and the other processes with you as smooth as possible. So what I want to do now is just circle back to a few of the questions about the IT systems. We had a question about dashboards, particularly whether the dashboard will be a VTA holder or a brand level. If I can just take a step back, these dashboards, where do they come in? So they won't be a 1 July thing. For 1 July, we're focusing on, and actually early go live, pre-1 July, we're focusing on the data and Rover and the RAV, getting that piece up and running so you can submit your data. In the second half of this year, we're expecting by September, we will make the next release of NVES software up and running, and that will introduce these dashboards. So you'll have access to an NVES portal, which will be built into Rover. So you won't need to be logging into a separate system. Where you log in now to Rover, there will appear an NVES icon. You'll be able to click that and link to the NVES portal, which will give you your dashboards so you can see how you're running with the entries you've made to the RAV and other information, and in due course the details you'll need about your registry activity. So that's what the dashboard is. And look, at this point, those dashboards will be organised by VTA holder, but we are thinking and looking into how that could be extended to brands or whether that kind of can work. Again, if you have thoughts about that, please do let us know. Sorry, that was like typing an email, or let you know, the IT working group know, and we can bring that about. But the broader piece, which also has been raised about permissions, including where the VTA holder is an overseas entity, and the people who operate the RAV are local under authorization from the VTA holder. Look, for NVES purposes, we're going to work in with those permissions, and we actually are going to be running a workshop to tease out how best permissions could work. If you want to be part of that workshop, email me, and I'll put you in. Again, it's Daniel and his colleague Rashmi from Deloitte who'll be running that workshop, so we can tease out how to best set up permission structures that cater for the range of how your companies want to manage your NVES affairs. But essentially, who you have authorizing RAV users or Rover users in your company, that authorizing person will be able to authorize people to operate NVES dashboard functions in due course. Okay. Look, there was also a question about some of the lessons we've got out of the testing environment so far. What are those lessons? Essentially, it's about getting the vehicle type correctly entered. We've already set up a guide which spells out the criteria for each of the 4 NVES fields, including the vehicle type. But what we've found in practice is that sometimes there are some alternative ways of expressing that vehicle type that companies want to use. So we've worked through that and have earmarked some alternative usages, which I'm happy to send around. It's in the full slide pack, but I'll point that out in the follow-up material we have for you. So you can see all of that. Just looking to any other sort of key questions that's come up in the IT space. Bear with me a moment. Yes, Genevieve, what's our top of the pops question that's now
currently our top of the
pending?
pops question is: if brand A is supplying vehicles to brand B and the vehicle appears to be a brand B vehicle on the surface, but the vehicle type approval holder is brand A, how would this be managed on the dashboard?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, well, as I said, the dashboards will be organised by VTA holder. So at the fundamental level. But look, I'd be very interested to know more about that issue. And in fact, we'd like to tease that out a bit more just so we understand really what's happening there. So if we could, Genevieve, take hold of that question, and we'll follow that up. That'd be very interesting. Okay. Genevieve, are there any further IT questions at the moment that are trending?
Not that I can see at the moment. Most of them are about final emissions values and penalties. So I might hand over to Dave.
Okay.
To answer some of those questions. Thanks, Anthony.
Vinny, can I ask a favour? Can we just maybe just go back to the slide that I had the timeline on, please? Because what I'll try to do is maybe talk through the timeline a little bit slower than what I did previously to cover off a few of the questions. So as I said, we're talking about the first, I'm just going to use the example for the 2025 period. So from the 1st of July 2025, when you're importing a vehicle into the country, you'll need to enter those details onto the RAV. Those details will be calculated across your fleet up until the 31st of December 2025, which will then end the first compliance period. At which point in time, the regulation team will be focused on reviewing the information and ensuring the data that has been provided results in the correct calculation of an IEV, which will be issued in February 2026. At that point in time, the regulated entities will have choices about how, I guess, their final result if they don't meet the target, and I'll be very clear, if you're I guess beyond or over the target, you'll have options in what you need to do to address in getting to a value of 0. If you have a negative result, then you will be issued units into the registry if your account is opened. Like I said, the account managers will talk each of you through the process to get an account opened, probably from around September of this year, because that's when the functionality will be available. And then we'll be able to ensure that you're trained in the use of the registry and you're fully aware of how it operates by the time that you actually need to use it for February 2026. So that should answer a couple of questions that I saw that were there. From February 2026, those people who are issued units in the registry will be able to trade them with the interested parties who are looking to acquire units to reduce their positive IEV to a value of 0. So that will be published so that you'll have access to that information. You will be able to then, hopefully, what we'll do is reach out and ask for the contact details of people who will need to, who will be the contact points for the various entities, and we will internally look at a way to be able to provide that information probably through the NVES portal rather than anything external. You'll then be able to approach individuals, initiate a trade, and then we will take carriage of initiating that trade during for the first compliance period of 2025. You'll have 2 years to either trade the units or whether to reduce your IEV by a negative IEV for a following preceding period, or you may well choose to do nothing. And then when we get to the end of that complete compliance period, which would be in February 2028, that is at which point in time we'll review for the February 2025 compliance period what your final emissions value is and what transactions that you've undertaken to get to your final emissions value. At that point in time, if you haven't reduced it to 0, what the regulator can do is issue an infringement notice. The infringement notice is issued for 50% of the maximum payable penalty, which is $100. So that means on an infringement notice, it'll be $50 for each unit that you do not meet the target by. So it's not 100, it's 50, payable on an infringement notice only. If a regulated entity chooses to pay that infringement notice, it will be outlined the details within 28 days of how you then pay that. A regulated entity may choose not to pay the infringement. They may end up with a positive final emissions value, and then that becomes, after the 28 days have expired, the case is then referred for prosecution or for legal action to proceed. The payable penalty then becomes $100. You have chosen not to take the actions through paying the infringement notice, then the full penalty would become payable if there is a determination that is made by a court. They can do so up to the $100 per unit. So I know that that's a lot of information to take in, which is why the purpose of providing a guidance note, which talks about that plainly, outlines it so that you can take that away, digest it, come back, have a conversation with us, email us to the NVES Regulator at infrastructure.gov.au mailbox. It is complex. However, the key things to take away are, if you have an IEV and you don't meet the target, then obviously we'll be talking to you about establishing a unit registry account to trade your position out. If you're not able to do that, once we get to February 2028, we will be issuing panel infringement notices, which are for $50 per unit that you don't meet the standard as per the Regulatory Powers Act, which we refer to in issuing infringement notices. If you don't pay the infringement notice within 28 days, then the final penalty payable becomes $100 per unit. So hopefully that summarises a number of the questions that had been raised in relation to, I guess, the overall process of unit registry creations, the issuance of an IEV and the issuance of an FEV and infringements.
Thanks, Dave. Our next question is, what are the regulatory values after the change from NEDC to WLTC? And I think this is a Karen question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. Look, I'm sure that many of you have been engaged in conversations with the emissions working group. As we stated at the start of this session, the government is now in caretaker mode, and as a result of that, today we won't be talking about any of the settings that are not current settings in our Act. So I'm sorry, but we won't be answering that today, but I can assure you that work has well advanced, and the team stand ready when we know the outcome of the election to move forward very quickly. Thanks, Jen.
Wonderful. I think that's all the time that we have left for questions.
Thanks so much, Jen, and thanks everybody who came today's session. We had quite a lot of questions in the Slido that we didn't manage to get to. I think like Dave going through some of that further detail, hopefully there was some nuggets of gold, and perhaps some of those nuggets that are answered in some of the broader slide pack. Having said that, we'll have a good look at the set of questions that came through and see if we can provide another way to answer particularly some of those questions that came through with lots of thumbs up. So I really appreciate you engaging and asking those questions. Look, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time. We know that we're giving you a lot of information in a very short period of time. Hopefully you have some connections or have some people who came along to the in-person event a couple of weeks ago who can perhaps expand on or give you some more detail as well, or provide some more of the context from our full slide deck. But rest assured we will continue to have these conversations, and we might chunk down into some of the smaller pieces in future so that we can spend a bit more detailed time on just one particular area. But we wanted to give you the full picture and make sure that everybody had the opportunity to understand the end-to-end vision with that user blueprint, which really is a very critical piece. It's the communication from the regulator to you. We've given it to you in writing. There's a lot there. Please take the time to have absorb and have a look at it. And as the team have said, please don't hesitate to come back forward to NVES Regulator at infrastructure.gov.au with any further questions, etc. But we will certainly come back to you with further sessions to come, and keep those questions coming. We really appreciate the engagement. Thanks for your time.